The sky above the small town of Willow Creek, Texas, was unusually dark that evening. The stars seemed dimmer than usual, almost as if they were being overshadowed by something larger, something unknown. A faint hum filled the air, a sound so low and steady that most people dismissed it as their imagination or perhaps just the wind playing tricks on them. But Jack Miller wasn't one to dismiss things easily. Jack was a tall, wiry man in his early 40s with calloused hands and a face weathered by years of working under the scorching sun. He ran a modest auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, fixing tractors, trucks, and anything else with an engine. His life was simple: work during the day, grab dinner at the local diner, and spend his evenings tinkering with old cars in his garage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough for him. That night, however, everything changed. As he stood outside his shop, wiping grease off his hands with a rag, Jack noticed a strange glow on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be lightning, though there hadn't been a storm forecasted. Curious, he squinted into the distance, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The glow grew brighter, pulsating like a heartbeat, and then suddenly, it moved, descending slowly toward the edge of town. Jack's heart skipped a beat. "What the hell is that?" he muttered to himself, dropping the rag onto the ground. Without thinking twice, he hopped into his pickup truck and sped down the dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust behind him. Whatever it was, it didn't look natural. And if there was one thing Jack hated more than anything, it was unanswered questions. Meanwhile, about 5 miles away, Laura Hayes was walking her dog along the quiet streets of her neighborhood. Laura was a schoolteacher in her mid-30s, known for her patience and kindness. She had always preferred the peace of small-town life over the chaos of big cities. Tonight, though, even she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Her dog, Max, kept stopping abruptly, his ears perked up, growling softly at nothing in particular. "Come on, boy," Laura said gently, tugging on the leash. "There's nothing out here." But Max wouldn't budge. Instead, he let out a low whine, staring intently at the sky. Following his gaze, Laura froze. There, hovering silently above the tree line, was a massive object unlike anything she'd ever seen. It shimmered faintly, its surface smooth and metallic, reflecting the moonlight in eerie patterns. For a moment, she thought it might be some kind of experimental aircraft, but deep down, she knew better. This was something else entirely. Back near the outskirts of town, Jack arrived just in time to see the glowing object touch down in an open field. His truck skidded to a halt as he stared in disbelief. The thing was enormous, easily the size of a football field, and yet it landed without making a single sound. No engines roared, no winds kicked up, just silence. It was unnatural, almost otherworldly. Cautiously, Jack stepped out of his truck, gripping a tire iron in one hand. He wasn't sure why he brought it, but having something solid in his grip made him feel marginally safer. As he approached the craft, he noticed strange symbols etched into its surface, glowing faintly in shades of blue and green. They pulsed, rhythmically, almost hypnotically, drawing him closer despite every instinct screaming at him to run. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet trembled. Jack stumbled backward, nearly dropping the tire iron. From the base of the ship, a hatch began to open, emitting a soft, hissing sound. A beam of light shot out, illuminating the surrounding area. Jack shielded his eyes, squinting against the brightness. When the light finally faded, he saw them, creatures unlike anything he could have imagined. They were tall, towering over 7 feet, with elongated limbs and smooth grayish skin. Their heads were large and oval-shaped, with wide black eyes that seemed to absorb everything around them. They moved gracefully, almost gliding across the ground, scanning the area with cold efficiency. Jack ducked behind a nearby bush, holding his breath. His mind raced with questions. Who or what were these beings? What did they want? And why had they come here? Laura, meanwhile, had decided to investigate further. Against her better judgment, she followed Max as he led her toward the same field where Jack was hiding. By the time she reached the edge of the woods, she caught sight of the alien ship and the creatures emerging from it. Her breath hitched in her throat. She wanted to scream, to turn and run, but her legs refused to move. Instead, she crouched behind a tree, clutching her phone tightly in her hand. Should she call for help? Who would believe her? As if sensing her presence, one of the aliens turned sharply in her direction. Its movements were fluid, almost mechanical, and its expressionless face gave no indication of emotion. Laura's heart pounded in her chest as she pressed herself flat against the tree trunk, praying it wouldn't see her. After what felt like an eternity, the creature turned away, seemingly satisfied that nothing posed a threat. But the relief was short-lived. Moments later, a loud buzzing noise filled the air. Both Jack and Laura looked up to see several smaller objects detaching from the main ship and spreading out across the field. These drones hovered silently, their sleek designs reminiscent of predatory birds. They scanned the area methodically, their red lenses flickering as they gathered data. Jack realized he needed to act fast. If those drones discovered him, or, worse, the rest of the town, it could mean disaster. Summoning all his courage, he grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it at the nearest drone. To his surprise, the impact caused it to wobble slightly before stabilizing itself. Encouraged, he threw another, this time hitting it dead center. With a sharp crackle, the drone exploded into sparks, crashing to the ground. Laura watched from her hiding spot, amazed by Jack's boldness. She knew staying hidden was the smart choice, but something inside her stirred. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was adrenaline. But whatever it was, it pushed her to act. Grabbing a fallen branch, she crept closer to another drone and swung with all her might. The wooden stick shattered on impact, but the drone faltered, spinning erratically before plummeting to the earth. By now, the aliens had taken notice. Their once calm demeanor shifted to agitation as they communicated with each other in rapid bursts of clicks and whistles. One of them pointed toward Jack's position, and within seconds, two of the creatures began advancing in his direction. Jack cursed under his breath, realizing he was outnumbered and outgunned, but he wasn't about to give up without a fight. He sprinted back to his truck, yanking open the door and rummaging through the toolbox inside. Pulling out a wrench, he prepared to defend himself as best he could. Just as the aliens closed in, however, a deafening roar echoed through the field. Startled, everyone, including the aliens, turned to see a tractor barreling toward them, driven by none other than Laura. "Get in," she shouted, skidding to a stop beside Jack. Without hesitation, he leapt onto the passenger seat as she slammed the accelerator, sending the tractor hurtling forward. Behind them, the aliens raised their arms, emitting a high-pitched screech that sent shivers down both their spines. But they didn't pursue. Instead, they retreated to their ship, watching silently as the humans disappeared into the night. Breathing heavily, Jack glanced at Laura, who kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You're crazy, you know that?" he said, half joking. She smirked, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Yeah, well, so are you." Neither of them spoke much after that. They drove in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. What had started as an ordinary evening had spiraled into something neither of them could have anticipated. But one thing was clear. The world as they knew it would never be the same again. Unbeknownst to Jack and Laura, their actions that night marked the beginning of something far greater. Across the globe, similar encounters were unfolding, with ordinary people rising to meet an extraordinary threat. The aliens, confident in their superiority, had underestimated humanity, a mistake that would soon cost them dearly. The next morning, the town of Willow Creek buzzed with whispers. People gathered at the local diner, sipping coffee and trading stories about strange lights in the sky and odd noises that had kept them awake all night. Some dismissed it as a meteor shower or military exercises, but others weren't so sure. Jack and Laura sat in a corner booth, their faces pale and drawn from lack of sleep. They hadn't told anyone what they'd seen. Not yet. But the weight of the secret hung heavy between them. "You think anyone would believe us if we said we saw aliens?" Laura asked quietly, stirring sugar into her coffee without really looking at it. Jack leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. "Probably not. Hell, I barely believe it myself, and I was there." Laura nodded slowly, her mind replaying the events of the previous night over and over again. The glowing ship, the towering creatures, the drones, it all felt like something out of a movie. But the scorch marks on the field and the twisted remains of the downed drone were proof enough that it wasn't just a dream. As they sat there trying to piece together what had happened, news began trickling in from other parts of the country. Reports surfaced online of similar sightings, strange crafts hovering over rural areas, mysterious power outages, and livestock behaving erratically. At first, most people assumed it was some kind of prank or hoax, but as more accounts emerged, skepticism gave way to unease. Something was happening, and no one knew quite what to make of it. That afternoon, Jack decided to return to the field where the alien ship had landed. He wanted answers, or at least some clue about what he was dealing with. Laura insisted on coming along, arguing that two heads were better than one. Armed with flashlights, gloves, and a toolbox, they drove back to the site, their nerves taut, like guitar strings. When they arrived, the field looked eerily untouched, save for the charred patches where the drones had crashed. Jack knelt beside one of the wreckage sites, examining the fragments scattered across the ground. The material was unlike anything he'd ever seen, smooth and metallic, yet impossibly light. It didn't dent or scratch when he tried to pry it apart with his tools. Frustrated, he tossed the wrench aside and sighed. "This stuff is crazy," he muttered, running his fingers over the surface. It's not even from here." Laura crouched beside him, her brow furrowed in concentration. She picked up a shard of the debris and turned it over in her hands. "Do you think it's alien tech?" "It has to be," Jack replied. "What else could it be?" They spent hours combing through the area, collecting pieces of the wreckage and stashing them in a duffel bag. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the field, Laura noticed something glinting in the dirt a few feet away. She walked over and bent down, brushing away the soil to reveal a small device embedded in the ground. It was roughly the size of a smartphone, with blinking lights and tiny buttons arranged in unfamiliar patterns. "Jack, look at this," she called, holding it up for him to see. Jack hurried over, his eyes widening as he examined the object. "Careful with that," he said cautiously. "We don't know what it does." Laura nodded, wrapping the device carefully in a cloth before slipping it into her pocket. "Whatever it is, it might help us figure out what they're doing here." By the time they returned home, exhaustion had settled into their bones, but neither of them could rest. Their minds raced with possibilities, fears, and questions that demanded answers. That night, unable to sleep, Laura spread the salvaged pieces of alien technology across her dining table, studying them under the dim glow of a desk lamp. Jack joined her, bringing coffee and snacks to keep them going. "I've been thinking," Laura said after a while, her voice soft but steady. "If these things are advanced enough to travel across space, then maybe their tech can interface with ours. Like computers or phones or something." Jack raised an eyebrow. "You mean hack into it?" "Sort of," she replied. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, but if we can figure out how it works, we might be able to use it against them." Jack hesitated, staring at the pieces laid out before them. "And if we mess it up? What if it blows up or something?" Laura shrugged. "Then we blow up." "But honestly, Jack, do we have a choice? We can't just sit around waiting for them to come back." Reluctantly, Jack agreed. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, tinkering with the alien device and testing its compatibility with human electronics. It was slow, frustrating work, filled with trial and error. More than once, they nearly gave up, convinced it was impossible. But then, late one evening, they made a breakthrough. Laura connected the alien device to her laptop using wires scavenged from old appliances. To their astonishment, the screen flickered to life, displaying streams of data written in symbols they couldn't understand. While the language barrier remained a challenge, the sheer volume of information suggested they were onto something big. "We're in," Laura whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "We're actually in." Jack leaned closer, squinting at the screen. "Can you decode any of it?" "Not yet," she admitted. "But I think I can isolate patterns. Maybe find a way to disrupt their systems or, I don't know, track their movements. While Jack and Laura delved deeper into the alien tech, strange occurrences continued to plague Willow Creek and surrounding areas. Power lines failed without explanation, cutting off electricity for hours at a time. Animals grew increasingly agitated, refusing to stay in barns or fields. Even the weather seemed unpredictable, shifting abruptly from clear skies to violent storms. One evening, as Jack drove back from the shop, he noticed a group of farmers gathered near the edge of town. Curious, he pulled over and approached them. They stood in a loose circle, talking animatedly and pointing toward the horizon. When Jack joined them, he saw what had caught their attention, a cluster of drones hovering silently above a distant hill. "They've been circling for hours," one of the men said, his voice tinged with anger. "Scaring off the cattle and messing with the crops." Another farmer spat on the ground. Data. The farmers weren't the only ones noticing changes. Across Willow Creek and neighboring towns, people were starting to realize that something big was happening, something beyond their understanding. Jack and Laura had shared bits of their discovery with a few trusted neighbors, showing them fragments of the alien tech and explaining what they'd seen. At first, skepticism ruled the room. But as stories of strange lights, power failures, and eerie drones spread, more and more, people began to take it seriously. One evening, a group of about 20 residents gathered in an old barn on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, a dusty space filled with hay bales, rusted tools, and the smell of aged wood, but it served as a meeting place. Jack stood at the center, holding up a piece of the alien drone wreckage. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. He hadn't slept properly in days, his mind consumed by the weight of what they were facing. "This isn't some government experiment or weather anomaly," Jack said, his voice firm despite his fatigue. "These things are aliens. They're here and they're watching us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded grimly, while others shifted uncomfortably, unsure if they should believe him. Laura stepped forward, her presence calming. She held up the small alien device they'd been studying, its blinking lights casting faint shadows on her face. "We've been working on this," she explained, her tone measured and clear. "It's their technology. We don't understand all of it yet, but we think we can use it to fight back." "Fight back?" one man asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Against aliens? You two have lost your minds." Jack shook his head, frustration creeping into his expression. "We don't have a choice. If we sit around waiting for someone else to handle this, it'll be too late. Look at what's already happening. Power outages, livestock scared off, those damn drones flying around like vultures. They're testing us, figuring out how weak we are." "And what makes you think we can stop them?" another woman chimed, in crossing her arms. "They've got ships and weapons and God knows what else. What do we have?" "We have each other," Laura replied quickly, her eyes scanning the room. "And we have brains. These aliens might be advanced, but they don't know us. They don't know how resourceful we can be when we work together." Her words hung in the air, heavy but hopeful. Slowly, the skepticism began to fade, replaced by determination. One by one, people started asking questions, practical ones. How could they defend themselves? What kind of traps could they set? Where would they get weapons? By the end of the hour, meeting, a plan was forming. The group decided to split into teams. Some would focus on gathering supplies, anything that could be turned into a weapon or tool. Others would scout the area, keeping an eye out for alien activity. A smaller team, led by Jack and Laura, would continue studying the alien tech, hoping to unlock its secrets. Over the next few days, the town transformed. Ordinary people became soldiers in their own right, preparing for a battle none of them had asked for. Farmers welded scrap metal into crude armor plating for trucks. Mechanics rigged flamethrowers using propane tanks and blowtorches. Hunters donated rifles and ammunition, teaching those who had never fired a gun how to aim and shoot. Even children pitched in, tying tripwires across fields and digging shallow pits to trap unwary drones. Laura spent most of her time in her makeshift lab, a cluttered corner of her living room, poring over the alien device. With Jack's help, She managed to isolate certain signals being transmitted by the drones. Though the language barrier remained, they figured out how to jam the signals temporarily, disrupting the aliens' ability to communicate with their machines. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them a fighting chance. Meanwhile, Jack took charge of organizing patrols. He divided the volunteers into shifts, ensuring someone was always watching the skies. One night, during his own shift, he spotted a drone hovering near a cluster of abandoned buildings. Without hesitation, he radioed Laura, who activated the signal jammer from her house. The drone faltered mid-air, its red lens flickering wildly before it plummeted to the ground with a metallic crash. Word of their success spread quickly. Other towns heard about Willow Creek's resistance efforts and began reaching out for advice. Soon, similar groups sprang up across the region, sharing strategies and pooling resources. For the first time since the aliens arrived, there was a sense of unity. Not just within Willow Creek, but among communities far beyond. But the aliens weren't idle. As human resistance grew stronger, so did their response. Drones appeared more frequently, scanning towns and villages with increasing aggression. In some cases, they deployed energy beams that fried electrical systems and left entire neighborhoods in darkness. Livestock disappeared overnight, their bodies found mutilated in nearby fields. The message was clear. The aliens were done observing. They were ready to strike. Kael'tor, the leader of the Virkans, watched the unfolding chaos from his command ship orbiting Earth. Screens displayed live footage of human activities. Farmers arming themselves, civilians setting traps, and clusters of resistance fighters coordinating attacks. His advisors stood beside him, their expressions tense. They adapt too quickly, one advisor said, pointing to a video of a drone being destroyed by improvised explosives. Their methods are crude but effective. Kael'tor narrowed his eyes, his long fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest of his chair. Crude does not mean harmless, he replied coldly. These humans are proving to be unpredictable. Another advisor spoke up, hesitancy in his voice. Perhaps we underestimated them. Their decentralized nature makes them difficult to control. Should we consider? No. Kael'tor interrupted sharply. We will not retreat. This planet is ours to claim. If these primitives wish to resist, then we will crush them. Despite his outward confidence, doubt gnawed at Kael'tor. He had studied countless species during his conquests, each predictable in their behavior. Fear drove them to submission, and superiority ensured compliance. But humans were different. They didn't cower as expected. Instead, they fought back with ferocity, creativity, and sheer stubbornness. It was unsettling and fascinating. Back on Earth, Jack and Laura received reports of escalating alien attacks. Entire towns were being targeted, their defenses overwhelmed by waves of drones and ground troops. Casualties mounted and morale began to waver. But even in the face of mounting losses, the human spirit refused to break. One particularly brutal skirmish occurred in a neighboring town called Pine Ridge. A group of 50 civilians armed with shotguns, Molotov cocktails, and homemade flamethrowers faced off against a squad of Virkan soldiers. Outnumbered and outgunned, the humans used every trick they had learned. They lured the aliens into narrow streets lined with booby traps, ambushing them from rooftops and alleys. When the dust settled, half the town lay in ruins, but the aliens had been driven back. News of the victory reached Willow Creek the following day, reigniting hope among the townsfolk. Jack and Laura listened intently as survivors recounted the battle, noting the tactics that had worked and those that hadn't. Each story added to their growing playbook of strategies. "We're learning," Laura said quietly as they reviewed notes late into the night. "Every fight teaches us something new." Jack nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, but we're still losing too many people. We need to hit them harder, somewhere they won't expect." Laura glanced at him, her brow furrowed. "What are you thinking?" He hesitated, then leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "We bait them, use ourselves as targets, draw them into a trap where we have the advantage." Laura stared at him, weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. "If we pull it off, it could turn the tide, but if we fail, we won't," Jack said firmly. though his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. The decision was made. Over the next week, Jack and Laura coordinated with neighboring towns to prepare the largest ambush yet. Using hacked alien tech, they broadcast false signals indicating a heavily populated area ripe for conquest. The ruse worked. Reconnaissance drones began circling the designated location, relaying coordinates back to the Virkan fleet. On the chosen night, hundreds of civilians gathered in hidden bunkers and trenches surrounding the trap site. Weapons were loaded, nerves were steadied, and prayers were whispered under breaths. Above them, the stars twinkled innocently, unaware of the storm brewing below. When the alien forces descended, they walked straight into hell. Hidden explosives detonated, sending shockwaves through the valley. Traps snapped shut, ensnaring drones and soldiers alike. From every direction, humans emerged, firing guns, hurling grenades, and shouting defiance. The aliens fought back fiercely, their superior weaponry cutting through human lines, but the sheer chaos of the ambush overwhelmed them. As dawn broke, the battlefield fell silent. Bodies littered the ground, both human and alien. Smoke rose from smolder as dawn broke. The battlefield fell silent. Bodies littered the ground, both human and alien. Smoke rose from smoldering wreckage, and the acrid smell of burnt metal filled the air. Exhausted but alive, Jack and Laura stood side by side surveying the devastation. "They'll remember this," Jack said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "They'll know we're not giving up." Laura nodded, clutching the alien device tightly in her hand. The ambush at the valley had been a turning point, but it came at a heavy cost. Dozens of civilians had lost their lives and many more were injured. The makeshift medical tents set up around Willow Creek were overflowing with wounded people, their cries mixing with the hum of generators powering emergency lights. Despite the victory, the mood was somber. Jack and Laura walked among the survivors, offering words of encouragement where they could, but even they struggled to find hope. In the aftermath, Laura paused by one of the tents, her eyes lingering on a young boy with a bandaged arm. His mother sat beside him, holding his hand tightly while tears streamed down her face. Laura felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to say something, anything, to comfort them, but no words seemed adequate. Instead, she placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder before moving on. Jack, meanwhile, was helping load supplies onto trucks. They needed to restock weapons, ammunition, and medical gear as quickly as possible. Every moment counted. The aliens might regroup and strike again at any time, and they couldn't afford to be caught off guard. As he worked, his mind kept replaying. The battle, the explosions, the screams, the sight of alien bodies lying motionless on the ground. He wasn't sure whether to feel pride or guilt. Had they really won? Or had they just delayed the inevitable? That night, Jack and Laura met in her living room, surrounded by maps, notes, and fragments of alien tech. Neither of them had slept properly in days, and dark circles hung under their eyes. Still, there was work to do. The alien device they'd been studying had revealed new information after the ambush. By analyzing data intercepted during the fight, Laura discovered patterns in the aliens' movements and communication signals. "They're not random," she said, pointing to a series of symbols glowing faintly on her laptop screen. "Their attacks follow a structure, like a plan." Jack leaned closer, squinting at the display. "What kind of plan?" "I think they're mapping us," Laura replied, her voice low and urgent. "Studying our weaknesses, figuring out how we operate. It's like they're trying to understand us before they make their next move." "Makes sense," Jack muttered. "They've already seen that we're tougher than they thought. Maybe they're looking for a way to break us." Laura nodded grimly. "If we don't stay ahead of them, they'll find it." Determined to uncover more, they spent hours poring over the alien data. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. One breakthrough came when Laura managed to isolate a frequency used by the aliens to coordinate their forces. By tweaking their signal jammer, she found a way to disrupt this frequency temporarily, creating gaps in the aliens' ability to communicate. "This could give us an edge," she explained excitedly, showing Jack the modified device. "We can blind them at least for a little while during future fights." Jack grinned despite his exhaustion. "You're amazing, you know that?" Laura smiled faintly, though her expression remained serious. "Let's just hope it's enough." While Jack and Laura worked tirelessly to decode alien technology, other towns across the region were stepping up their efforts too. News of the successful ambush spread rapidly, inspiring others to take action. In some areas, entire communities banded together to fortify their defenses. Farmers dug trenches and built barricades using old tractors and scrap metal. Hunters patrolled the woods, keeping watch for signs of alien activity. Even children contributed, crafting decoys and spreading misinformation online to confuse the invaders. In one particularly daring operation, a group of teenagers hacked into local radio stations and broadcast fake messages mimicking alien transmissions. The ruse worked. Several drones were lured into empty fields where hidden traps destroyed them. Word of the teenagers' success reached Jack and Laura, who couldn't help but laugh at the ingenuity of it all. "Kids these days," Jack joked, shaking his head. "Who needs fancy gadgets when you've got brains?" But not every attempt ended in victory. In another town, a poorly planned ambush resulted in heavy casualties. The aliens responded with brutal efficiency, deploying advanced weaponry that left buildings reduced to rubble. Survivors fled into the countryside, carrying tales of destruction that served as both a warning and a call to arms. Kaltor watched these developments from his command ship, his patience wearing thin. Screens displayed footage of human resistance growing stronger and more organized. Reports from his advisors painted a troubling picture. Humans were adapting faster than anticipated, learning from each encounter and improving their tactics. "We underestimated them," one advisor admitted reluctantly. "Their decentralized nature makes them unpredictable. Traditional strategies are ineffective." Kaltor clenched his jaw, his long fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. "Unpredictability is not strength," he snapped. "It is chaos, and chaos can be controlled." Another advisor stepped forward hesitantly. "Perhaps we should consider alternative methods. Psychological warfare, perhaps. Exploit their emotions. Divide them further." "No," Kaltor interrupted sharply. "Enough delays. We will crush them directly. Deploy additional forces. Target their largest settlements. Show them the full extent of our power." The order sent waves of fear through the human population. Within hours, reports flooded in of massive alien ships descending upon cities and towns. Civilians scrambled to evacuate, abandoning homes and belongings in a desperate bid to escape. The scale of the attacks was unprecedented, leaving devastation in their wake. In Willow Creek, Jack and Laura received word of the assaults just in time to prepare. They rallied the townsfolk, urging everyone to stay calm and stick to the plan. Hidden bunkers were reinforced, traps were reset, and weapons were distributed. Though fear lingered in the air, there was also a steely resolve. These people had faced death before, and they weren't about to back down now. When the aliens finally arrived, they expected an easy victory. Their ships hovered menacingly above the town, casting long shadows over the streets below. Ground. Troops descended, their sleek armor glinting in the sunlight. But as they advanced, they realized something was wrong. The town appeared deserted, its streets eerily quiet. "Where are they?" one soldier asked, his voice distorted by his helmet's translator. Before anyone could answer, the first trap sprang. Explosions erupted throughout the town, sending shockwaves through the air. Hidden snipers opened fire from rooftops, picking off soldiers one by one. Drones faltered as signal jammers disrupted their systems, crashing to the ground in fiery heaps. The aliens tried to regroup, but the chaos was overwhelming. From their position in a nearby bunker, Jack and Laura watched the scene unfold. Laura held the modified signal jammer tightly, her knuckles white from gripping it so hard. Beside her, Jack clutched a rifle, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "They're falling for it," he whispered, his voice filled with cautious optimism. "Not yet," Laura replied, her gaze fixed on the largest alien ship hovering above the town. "They'll send reinforcements soon. We need to finish this fast." As if on cue, a second wave of alien forces descended, this time armed with heavier weapons. Energy beams sliced through buildings, setting fires that roared into the sky. Civilians fought back with everything they had, their determination unyielding. Children hurled Molotov cocktails from windows while elderly men fired shotguns from behind barricades. It was chaos, but it was working. Amid the fighting, Jack spotted a critical weakness. The aliens relied heavily on their leader, a towering figure directing the assault from a raised platform near the center of town. If they could take him out, the rest of the forces might fall into disarray. "Laura, I've got an idea," he said, grabbing her arm. "Cover me." Without waiting for a response, he sprinted toward the platform, dodging blasts and ducking behind cover. Laura followed close behind, firing her weapon to keep enemy soldiers at bay. When they reached the base of the platform, Jack climbed quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. At the top, he came face to face with the alien commander. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The alien stared at him, its black eyes unreadable. Then, without hesitation, Jack swung his rifle like a club, striking the creature with all his strength. The impact sent it stumbling backward, its body crashing to the ground below. A cheer rose from the humans as the remaining alien forces began retreating, their formation crumbling without leadership. Breathing heavily, Jack turned to Laura, who had joined him on the platform. "Did we do it?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yeah, Jack, I think we did." As the dust settled and the last of the aliens fled, the townsfolk emerged from their hiding places, cheering and embracing one another. The victory was hard-fought and costly, but it proved something vital. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. And somewhere high above, aboard his command ship, Kyle-Tor watched the scene with mounting dread. For the first time, he began to question whether conquering Earth would truly be worth the price. The victory in Willow Creek sent ripples across the globe. Videos of the battle, shot by civilians on shaky phones, spread like wildfire online. Grainy footage showed aliens retreating under relentless human fire, their sleek armor scorched and broken. Social media buzzed with hashtags like "Daring Stand with Willow Creek" and "Earth Fights Back." For the first time since the aliens arrived, humanity felt a flicker of hope. Jack and Laura became reluctant symbols of resistance. Their faces appeared on news websites and community forums, often accompanied by captions like "The Mechanics Who Fought Back" or "Small-Town Heroes." Neither of them wanted the attention, they were just trying to survive, but they couldn't deny the impact it had. Towns and cities far beyond Texas began organizing similar efforts, modeling their strategies after what happened in Willow Creek. In one video call with a group of farmers from Nebraska, Jack leaned back in his chair, looking exhausted but determined. "It's not about fancy weapons or big plans," he said, his voice rough from shouting during battles. "It's about knowing your land, working together and never giving up." Laura chimed in, holding up the alien device they'd been studying. "And using whatever tools you have," she added, "even if it's something as simple as this." Her words inspired countless others. People started experimenting with alien tech salvaged from downed drones and ships. Some used it to create better signal jammers, while others modified it into makeshift weapons. A teenager in Ohio even managed to rig an alien power core to a tractor engine, creating a mobile EMP generator that could disable entire squads of drones at once. The innovations came fast and furious, each one adding to humanity's growing arsenal. But despite the newfound optimism, the cost of resistance was mounting. Casualties continued to rise, and resources were dwindling. Food shortages became common, as supply chains broke down under constant alien attacks. Hospitals struggled to treat the wounded with limited medicine and equipment. And yet, through it all, people kept fighting, not because they believed they could win, but because surrender was no longer an option. Kyle-Tor watched these developments from his command ship, his frustration boiling over. Screens displayed endless streams of data showing human resistance spreading like wildfire. Reports from his advisors painted a grim picture. Humans were adapting faster than ever, learning from every encounter and improving their tactics. What had started as scattered acts of defiance had evolved into a coordinated global effort. "They are unlike any species we have encountered," one advisor admitted during a tense meeting aboard the ship. Their adaptability is unprecedented. Kyle Tor slammed his fist against the armrest of his chair, his patience wearing thin. Unprecedented does not mean invincible, he snarled. We are superior in every way. Technology, strength, strategy, we should have crushed them by now. Another advisor spoke up cautiously, choosing his words carefully. Perhaps our approach needs adjustment. If brute force has failed, perhaps we must exploit their vulnerabilities, divide them, break their spirit. Keltor glared at him, his black eyes gleaming with anger. But deep down, he knew the advisor was right. Humans might lack advanced technology, but their unity was proving to be a formidable weapon. To defeat them, Keltor would need to dismantle that unity, and he already had an idea how. The next wave of attacks came without warning. Instead of targeting large towns or cities, the aliens struck smaller communities, places too remote to mount significant defenses. Villages were razed to the ground, their inhabitants either killed or taken captive. The brutality of the assaults shocked even those who had grown accustomed to violence. It was clear the aliens were sending a message: resist and you will suffer. In Willow Creek, the news hit hard. Refugees poured into the town, bringing stories of horror and loss. Jack and Laura worked tirelessly to help them, setting up temporary shelters and distributing food and supplies. But the influx of survivors put a strain on the town's already limited resources. Tensions began to rise as people argued over rationing and priorities. We can't save everyone, one man shouted during a heated town meeting. If we keep taking in refugees, we'll run out of food before the aliens even get here. And if we turn them away, we're no better than monsters. Laura shot back, her voice firm despite the exhaustion etched into her face. We fight because it's right. Turning our backs on those in need isn't who we are. Her words silenced the room, but the tension remained. Jack stepped forward, addressing the crowd. Laura's right, we stick together, that's how we survive. But we also need to prepare for what's coming. The aliens aren't done with us yet. As if on cue, reports came in of increased alien activity near the town. Scouts spotted drones circling overhead, mapping the area with chilling precision. Everyone knew another attack was imminent. That night, Jack and Laura met in her living room, surrounded by maps and notes. The air was thick with unease as they discussed their options. They had successfully defended Willow Creek before, but the stakes were higher now. With so many refugees depending on them, failure wasn't an option. We need to hit them first, Jack said finally, breaking the silence. Take the fight to them before they bring it to us. Laura frowned, leaning forward. You mean ambush them again? Exactly. We know their patterns now. We can predict where they'll strike next and set a trap. But we're stretched thin, Laura countered. If we send forces out, we leave the town vulnerable. I know, Jack replied, his voice heavy with resolve. But if we don't act, they'll wipe us out anyway. At least this way we have a chance. After much deliberation, they decided to proceed with the plan. Volunteers were recruited for the mission, and supplies were gathered hastily. Among those chosen was a young woman named Emily, whose family had fled to Willow Creek after their farm was destroyed. She had never held a weapon before, but desperation had hardened her resolve. I'm not afraid, she told Jack as they loaded gear onto trucks. Not anymore. The group set out at dawn, traveling quietly through dense woods to avoid detection. By midday, they reached their target, a narrow valley where alien patrols had been spotted frequently. Using the terrain to their advantage, they set traps and positioned themselves strategically, waiting for the enemy to arrive. Hours passed in tense silence. Just as doubts began creeping in, the sound of humming filled the air. Drones appeared, on the horizon, followed by ground troops marching in tight formation. Jack signaled for everyone to stay hidden as the aliens entered the valley. When the moment was right, Laura activated the signal jammer. The drones faltered immediately, crashing to the ground in bursts of sparks. At the same time, explosives detonated along the edges of the valley, sending shockwaves through the alien ranks. Chaos erupted as humans emerged from their hiding spots, firing weapons and hurling grenades with ferocious intensity. The battle was brutal and chaotic, but the humans held their ground. When the dust settled, the valley was littered with alien bodies and shattered machinery. Exhausted but triumphant, the group regrouped, tending to their wounded and gathering intelligence from the wreckage. Back in Willow Creek, news of the victory brought renewed hope. But Jack and Laura knew the war was far from over. As they stood side by side, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, they shared a quiet moment of reflection. "They're scared," Laura said softly, her voice tinged with both satisfaction and sadness. "For the first time, they're scared of us." Jack nodded, his jaw clenched tightly. "Good. Maybe now they'll think twice before messing with Earth." Unbeknownst to them, Kaltor was reaching the same conclusion. Watching footage of the latest defeat, he realized the truth. Humans weren't just resisting, they were evolving. Stripped of societal norms and driven by sheer willpower, they had tapped into something primal, something dangerous, something that made them more than prey. "They are apex predators," Kaltor muttered to himself, his voice barely audible. "And we have awakened them." For the first time since arriving on Earth, doubt crept into his mind. Perhaps conquering this planet would require more than brute force. Perhaps it was a mistake he couldn't afford to make. The alien attack slowed down after the ambush in the valley. For days, Willow Creek remained eerily quiet. No drones circled overhead, no strange hums filled the air, and no signs of alien activity disturbed the town. At first, people celebrated, believing the invaders had finally given up. But Jack and Laura weren't convinced. "They're planning something," Jack said one evening, as he and Laura sat on her porch, watching the horizon darken. "They don't just walk away." Laura nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the alien device she still carried everywhere. "Maybe they're regrouping, or worse, they're coming back with everything they've got." Her words hung heavy in the air. Despite their victories, the weight of what was at stake pressed down on them. The aliens were powerful, and humanity's resilience could only go so far against such overwhelming odds. Still, the people of Willow Creek refused to give up. They worked tirelessly, reinforcing defenses, gathering supplies, and training newcomers who arrived daily seeking refuge. One morning, a scout team returned from the outskirts of town with alarming news. They had spotted massive alien ships descending into Earth's atmosphere, bigger than anything seen before. These weren't scouts or patrols, these were warships, bristling with weapons and glowing ominously against the sky. Kaltor had made his decision: total annihilation. Word spread quickly, sending waves of fear through the town. Refugees huddled together, clutching their children and praying for safety. Volunteers checked their weapons, sharpened blades, and fortified bunkers. Everyone knew this would be the final stand. If they lost, there would be nothing left. Jack called another meeting in the old barn where it all began. This time the room was packed, not just with locals but with representatives from neighboring towns who had joined forces with Willow Creek. Faces were pale, voices tense, but determination burned in every eye. "This is it," Jack said, standing tall despite the exhaustion etched into his features. "They're coming for us, and they're bringing everything they've got. But we've faced them before and we've beaten them before. We can do it again." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Laura stepped forward, holding up the alien device. "We've learned a lot about their tech," she explained. "We know how to jam their signals, disable their drones, and even use some of their own weapons against them. If we stick together and stay smart, we can hold our ground." The plan was simple but risky. The town would serve as bait once more, drawing the aliens into narrow streets and open fields rigged with traps. Signal jammers would disrupt their communications, while snipers positioned on rooftops picked off key targets. Every able-bodied person would fight, armed with whatever they could find. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. As night fell, the sky lit up with the glow of alien ships descending like vengeful gods. The ground trembled beneath their weight, and the air crackled with energy. Civilians took their positions silently, hearts pounding but resolve unshaken. Jack and Laura stood side by side near the center of town, weapons ready, eyes scanning the darkness. When the aliens struck, it was unlike anything they'd faced before. Waves of soldiers poured into the streets, their armor gleaming under the moonlight. Drones zipped through the air, firing beams of light that tore through buildings. Explosions rocked the town, sending debris flying in every direction. Yet the humans fought back with ferocious intensity, using every trick they'd learned to survive. Laura activated the signal jammer, causing dozens of drones to plummet from the sky. Jack led a group of fighters in close combat, wielding a wrench like a club and shouting encouragement to those around him. Children hurled rocks and bottles filled with flammable liquid, while elderly men fired rifles from hidden alcoves. The battle raged on, chaotic and brutal, with neither side willing to yield. Amid the chaos, Emily, the young woman who had fled her destroyed farm, found herself face to face with an alien soldier. Her hands shook as she raised her weapon, but she remembered Jack's words, "Don't let fear stop you." Summoning every ounce of courage, she pulled the trigger, watching as the creature collapsed to the ground. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't hesitate. She moved on to the next target, her fear replaced by fury. Kaltor observed the carnage from his command ship, his expression unreadable. Screens displayed live footage of humans fighting with savage determination, their makeshift weapons turning the tide in ways he hadn't anticipated. His advisors frantically relayed reports of mounting losses, urging him to reconsider the assault. "We cannot sustain this level of resistance," one advisor pleaded. "Their adaptability, it is unmatched." Kaltor clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had underestimated humanity twice now, and the cost was staggering. For the first time, doubt consumed him. Were these primitive beings truly worth the price of conquest? Could they ever truly be subdued? Finally, he made his decision. "Retreat," he ordered coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. "Withdraw all forces immediately." His advisors stared at him in disbelief. "But Commander," "I said retreat," Kaltor snapped, cutting them off. "This planet is not worth the loss of life. Prepare the fleet for departure." Below, the humans noticed the change almost instantly. Alien soldiers began withdrawing en masse, retreating toward their ships. Confusion rippled through the ranks as people realized what was happening. The aliens were leaving. Jack and Laura exchanged stunned looks before breaking into grins. Exhaustion gave way to euphoria as cheers erupted throughout the town. People hugged each other, cried, and laughed, unable to believe they had won. The nightmare was over, or so they thought. Hours later, a transmission broadcast across the globe. Kaltor's voice, distorted but clear, echoed through radios and televisions worldwide. "Humans of Earth," he began, his tone icy. "You have proven yourselves formidable. We will leave your planet, but know this. Should you ever venture beyond your solar system, we will return. Do not test us again." The message ended abruptly, leaving behind an uneasy silence. While many celebrated the aliens' departure, others couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had only delayed the inevitable. The galaxy was vast, and Earth was no longer alone. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be. Governments reasserted control, trying to piece together what had happened. Scientists studied the salvaged alien tech, eager to unlock its secrets. But for ordinary people like Jack and Laura, the experience changed everything. Sitting on her porch one evening, Laura watched Max chase fireflies in the yard. Jack joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. Neither spoke for a long moment, content to simply exist in the quiet aftermath of survival. "You think they'll come back?" Laura asked finally, breaking the silence. Jack shrugged, sipping his coffee. "Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, we're ready." She smiled faintly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Yeah. And if they do, we'll show them exactly why messing with Earth was the worst mistake they ever made." Far above, Kael'Tor's fleet disappeared into the stars, carrying with it lessons learned the hard way. Humanity might lack advanced technology, but they possessed something far more dangerous: the will to fight, adapt, and endure. In the end, that made them unstoppable, and somewhere deep in space, Kael'Tor knew it too.